back into HQ, brought to you by FanDuel. If you love the chaos, congratulations on this past weekend in college football. 7 top 20 teams lost. We also had 2 undefeateds who are no longer, Army and Indiana. And the SEC potential playoff teams, Alabama, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M, all weeping their sad little eyes in tears today. No love lost over here. Taking a look at the power rankings, according to Brandon Marcello, Oregon at number 1, Ohio State number 2, Notre Dame number 3, and Texas, the Longhorns, whose fate still hangs in the balance somehow. I don't entirely understand. They're going to explain it to me. Coming in at number 4. Let's welcome in Danny, Kanell, Brandon Marcello here. DK, I'm sure you had a little bit of a chance to do this on Saturday, but not the full day. And probably on Twitter, I think you're getting yelled at left and right by a crazy amount of people.
Yelled at me.
I didn't go all caps.
Yeah, I didn't go all caps.
I didn't yell.
Would you like to have a word about potential 5 teams getting into the college football playoff from the SEC, now down to who knows how many?
I mean, it was 6 or 7 if you listen to some people. Okay. Now it is down to 3 potentially.
You can say
yes, exactly.
You can say Josh Payton.
Our girl Mackenzie, I mean, she's a Georgia grad. She's using those numbers to try to finagle their way in. But I would like to, yeah, she was trying. But I would like to congratulate, both of you guys for just huge wins.
Oh my God, we were all loving it.
Getting to bowl eligibility, like it's been a while, especially for the Gators. Like I want to make sure you enjoy that win.
I need you to have just a little bit of self-awareness, Danny.
Why?
Because congratulations on your 2 wins.
We're all celebrating wins.
Get a bowl game because
we're all winners.
Trash.
We're already winners.
Why? Says who?
I'm trying to give an olive branch to you this day and celebrate all of our wins, which were all big wins for our programs. And
These
this
are
is
not
the
the
thanks
same.
I get.
Danny,
wow.
Danny, DJ Lagway is the future.
Brandon's here. Brandon's here.
I'm going to be a 7-win team. A 7-win team when we beat FSU this coming week. I need to stop talking.
Okay.
Hey, Brandon.
Yeah. What's up, Brandon? Let's dive into one of the games we've got coming up. Notre Dame at SC coming up this weekend here. Notre Dame, we saw them take down Army as well. They're a 7.5-point favorite in this game. It has not been the season that South Carolina, excuse me. I saw the SC. USC has won it. Danny, what do you think about this matchup and everything it means?
So we've, over the last couple weeks, there have been games that I've tried to circle to say maybe this is one that throws a wrench into everybody's college football playoff plans, because when you think you know, especially this year, you have no idea what is going to happen. And of course, Ole Miss, Alabama, a couple of those examples last week. And I would say this is one that's going to be tricky for Notre Dame. And I don't think they need style points. I don't think they need anything more than a win. But it's only just over a touchdown favorite. They go across the country, have to travel across multiple time zones. They're playing USC, who is a very talented roster that has underperformed this year. But they've made a switch at quarterback to Jaden Maeva, who's been mobile. He's kind of infused some life into this offense. And for a Notre Dame team that hasn't been tested, Brandon, I think this is a tricky spot for them. And sometimes you get a little bit uptight. You call the game a little bit differently when you know you're so close. I think that's what you saw with Penn State, who dodged disaster the other day against Minnesota. I think this is a tough spot for Notre Dame to be in.
Yeah, potentially. I'm still not quite impressed with USC's offense, especially against UCLA this past week, though I know that was probably going to be a low-scoring game anyway. I still think they're trying to figure things out after switching quarterbacks there. Notre Dame is playing just about as well as anybody in the country right now. Since losing to Northern Illinois, they've rattled off 9 straight wins, and those wins are by an average of 33 points. They're not just beating opponents, they're drilling them. And a big thing for them has been their defense. They've been electric. They've been fantastic. Riley Leonard's playing much better as a passer in that offense for Notre Dame. But you are right. Now they have to go across the country, which they haven't really quite had to do all season, and to go into a spot against a USC team that's trying to become bowl eligible. But also, here's the thing. I'm not expecting a big crowd out there in L.A., and I don't think there's going to be much of a home field advantage. It's just going to be a matter of Notre Dame's bodies and their body clock if they're ready for this game. It's an earlier game on the schedule. They don't have to wait till night after traveling across the country. I really like Notre Dame to cover in this game and end up winning by double digits, because it's their last opportunity to show the playoff committee, hey, we're worthy of where we are, and getting a first-round, home field advantage here and getting that extra week of rest here, because they don't have to play in a conference championship game. this is their last opportunity to show something to the playoff committee. I think they're going to come out on fire out there in LA.
Brandon, because Danny's all hot over here, I'm going to need you to explain this next game to me like I'm 5, because I thought Texas was fine. So Georgia has locked up a spot in the title game here. You get the Lone Star Showdown this week between Texas, who only has 1 loss on the season, and A&M, who lost to Auburn, now has 3 losses on the season, 2 in conference. However, Brandon, the winner of this still gets in the title game. So what is the math here?
I'm not going to explain the math because it's ridiculous.
Okay.
These tiebreaker scenarios that we're dealing with in college football right now, when we got rid of divisions and went to these super leagues, it took us 72 hours to figure out who that Oregon was going into the Big Ten championship game last week. On a Tuesday, they announced it. This is crazy. We got to get back to divisions or figure out better tiebreaker scenarios. But having said that, you know, Texas is in a very dangerous spot here, in my opinion. They could very well miss the playoff. Their resume is not stellar. Their best win really is at Vanderbilt. And they've lost in their one big game at home against Georgia by double digits in a game that they were owned in. Now they have to go on the road and play Texas A&M, a spot in the SEC championship game on the line. Both teams, if one of them wins, they end up going to Atlanta for that. If Texas loses on the road and does so potentially like double digits, are we talking about Texas actually sitting at home and being on the outside looking in the college football playoff? I think that's something we need to discuss here because, again, they have a lot of big wins as far as point spread. They've beaten a bunch of teams by 19-plus points, the most in the country, in fact, with 7. But where's the big win? Where's the big win against a top 10 team, a top 5 team, heck, even a top 20 team? It's not there. They can get it this week in College Station, but my goodness, good luck going into that Hornets' nest and trying to win in a rivalry game that has been off the books for the last 13 years. I'm not so sure Texas gets in the playoff if they lose this weekend. I
am with you, Brandon. I think this game has massive stakes for both of these programs. Clearly, this is a hated rivalry. Texas A&M views Texas with so much jealousy, and Texas looks down on the Aggies. I mean, it is a fascinating dynamic that unfolds in this rivalry. But I'm with you because I don't think you want to run the risk of starting to compare resumes to other 2-loss teams when your resume is not that great. You mentioned the Vanderbilt win. The only other one that I've even seen remotely close is a win against Colorado State, which they beat earlier this season. Michigan was supposed to be a big win. It's not anymore. They're 6-5, mostly 6-6 at the end of the year. This is your resume builder to go into the SEC championship to remove any doubt so that if you lose in the SEC title game, then you're probably still in. But I think this game is a very tough spot. I still think A&M might be the best team in Texas, and that was a few weeks ago that Longhorn fans have been reminding me over and over about. We shall see what happens in College Station, but it's a tough place to play. And don't forget, you know what Quinn Ewers was doing on his off day yesterday? Going to get an MRI on his ankle. Like, that is not a place going against Nick Scorton and that defensive line where you want to be hobbled in any way if you're Texas quarterback.
I thought you were about to say he was like visiting another school.
No, he wasn't doing that.
Is this eligibility? It's probably all out by now. I mean, who knows? So some CFP implications and that matchup. Also some in Clemson, South Carolina. Dabo Sweeney, he was on the CBS Sports College Football pregame show, and he had some fighting words saying it's basically an SEC Big Ten invitational in the playoff. Danny, explain the implications here for Clemson and South Carolina, if there are any.
I think this is a potential, I have to say that, potential play-in game for both of them, which is kind of crazy. Now, I think I would feel stronger about Clemson if they were to win against South Carolina. That would be a resounding win for them. They would be a 2-loss team. You'd start comparing resumes to some of those other teams we mentioned, but I do think they would need help, as would South Carolina. But I've already seen the SEC apologists like Jacqueline, like Mackenzie, and I guess Amanda now too. She's an SEC girl. I forgot about that. Starting to point out about South Carolina, how impressive their season has been, and their loss against LSU somehow should be erased from our memory because there was a couple bad calls, which is true, but it's like, oh, this team isn't really a 3-loss team. Like, that's what I keep hearing that, and it kind of drives me nuts. But I do think if they beat Clemson, that would be a big enough win for them to be potentially that 3-loss team to get in. And then what happens in the A&M game? Like, if A&M beats Texas, gets the SEC championship game, and loses to Georgia, that would be their 4th loss. That's what I think opens the door up for Clemson and South Carolina to potentially sneak in, very last-minute surprise. But I do think there's a potential to be in from this game, the winner of this game.
Danny, I'll say this about South Carolina. You mentioned that erasing the LSU result, but I will say this. The committee's supposed to weigh injuries, right? Remember, Lenora Sellers got injured in that game and was unable to really play full speed and then even play at all late in that game. I think that hurt them, and one of the big reasons why they lost that game against LSU, a game in which they were up big early when Sellers was healthy. So we have to consider that as well. Also, much like we talk about the men's basketball tournament, about the way teams finish this season, like in our last 10 games of men's basketball, consider South Carolina's schedule here. If they beat Clemson on the road this week, that would be 4 straight top 25 wins for them. And I know we want to talk about maybe we're bumping the SEC up a little bit too high, but it is still a very difficult conference. And you have to play that schedule. It's very difficult. And South Carolina is about as hot as anybody in the country against the top 25 teams that are being ranked week after week after week. So if you go on the road and beat Clemson in a rivalry game, I think Carolina has the potential to be that quote-unquote 4th team from the SEC to get into the playoff. Does that happen? I think still some other things have to happen, because after this weekend, to me, the SEC lost a spot in the playoff field and will have 3, and the ACC actually gained 1. I think the ACC now will have 2 teams in the playoff, but that, of course, can change as we look ahead to this next week.
Or 3, or potentially 3 from the ACC.
Okay.
You
This is a
haven't
hypothetical. It could happen.
thanked Jacqueline and I.
What's that?
Yeah.
You haven't thanked us.
Oh, thank you guys.
Okay.
Wait, what am I thanking you for?
Our wins.
I just want to, our wins, yeah. And
No,
I
I
just want to
congratulated
apologize.
you
I'll
on
take
this.
your olive branch, but I just needed to get it off my chest, Danny. I had to.
Okay.
The SEC rage.
That's right.
Therapy on HQ, Therapy on the Cover 3 podcast for college football fans.